In this presentation, we examine the documentary sale. Now, the documentary sale is a legal structure, and it permits international sales across long distances and across lengthy time periods. The typical documentary sale will involve a shipment of goods across oceans, which of course will require a lengthy delay between shipment of the goods and payment for the goods. And we handle that delay through the process known as the documentary sale. Now, we've previously discussed the expectations of the buyer and seller in a sales transaction. And briefly, in those transactions, the seller's expectation is to be paid. The seller expects to be paid as soon as the goods leave his hands. The buyer expects an opportunity to inspect the goods prior to paying for them. And in a face-to-face transaction, this is very easy to accomplish. The buyer will inspect the goods prior to the sale, and the seller will be paid when the seller surrenders possession of the goods. Obviously, this becomes much more difficult when distance increases. And as distance increases, so does the required time for transport. So we turn to the documentary sale. Now, there are 5 parties involved in the documentary sale. There's the seller, the buyer, the seller's bank, the buyer's bank, and the carrier. The carrier is going to be the entity that transports the goods. Now, the documentary sale provides the infrastructure that permits large-scale international sale of goods. So how does it work? An international sales transaction will begin the same way any sales transaction does. A contract is executed between the seller and the buyer, and that contract will contain the essential terms of the sale: the goods to be sold, the quantity, and the price. And once the sales contract has been executed, the buyer is responsible for securing financing through its bank to pay for the goods. Now, the buyer's bank is going to issue a legal document called a letter of credit, and it will send that letter of credit to the seller. Now, the letter of credit is a legal document that reflects the bank's willingness to extend credit to the buyer for the amount of the sale. The letter of credit thus provides the seller with the assurance that the buyer has sufficient financial resources to purchase the goods that are being purchased. Once the seller has received the letter of credit from the buyer's bank, the seller can ship those goods. And the seller can ship those goods knowing that if the goods conform with the contract, it will be paid on delivery of the goods. Now, once the seller receives the letter of credit, which again is assurance of the buyer's ability to pay, the seller can now deliver the goods to the carrier. And in exchange for the goods, the carrier will give the seller another legal document called a bill of lading. Now, the bill of lading is very important. And in fact, the bill of lading has 3 different uses. First of all, the bill of lading serves as the contract of carriage for the transport of the goods. In other words, the bill of lading is the agreement between the carrier and the seller to transport the named goods. Now, the bill of lading has another function, and that function is to act as a receipt for the goods. Thus, the carrier will note on the bill of lading any defects or damages in the goods that exist at the time of delivery. The bill of lading acts in the same manner as a warehouse receipt. The final function of a bill of lading, and probably its most important, is that the bill of lading serves as title to the goods. When the bill of lading is issued by the carrier, at that point, ownership of the goods is legally separated from possession of the goods. At this point, whichever party owns the bill of lading owns the goods that the bill of lading describes. So the bill of lading becomes a legal document, a negotiable document that can be exchanged between the parties. And when that bill of lading is exchanged, ownership to the goods is exchanged. Now, once the seller receives the bill of lading from the carrier, it will then transfer the bill of lading to its bank. At that point, the seller's bank will then transfer the bill of lading to the buyer's bank. The buyer's bank will then hold on to the bill of lading until the goods arrive. The buyer's bank will hold the goods, the bill of lading, in trust. Now, eventually, the goods will reach a port close to the buyer. This could be a few weeks later, it could be a year later. But when the goods reach the buyer's closest port, the buyer will have an opportunity to inspect the goods. If the goods conform to the contract, the buyer will notify its bank that it intends to accept delivery of the goods. Once the buyer has signaled its acceptance of the goods, it must then pay for the goods, either in cash or by drawing on the letter of credit. The buyer will send payment for the goods to its own bank. At that point, the buyer's bank will then give to the buyer the bill of lading. And the buyer, once it possesses the bill of lading, has a right to claim the goods from the carrier. The carrier must surrender the goods to anyone who presents the bill of lading. The buyer's bank, once it receives payment, will then transfer that payment to the seller's bank, and then the money will go to the seller. The seller's bank will forward the payment to the seller. And that is the conclusion of the documentary sale. The documentary sale is going to protect the seller's ability to receive payment. The documentary sale also protects the buyer's ability to receive conforming goods, goods that conform to the contract. And although it sounds complicated, the documentary sale process occurs thousands of times each year and permits international commerce to continue.